The runway was cloaked in thick fog. A Boeing 747 was ready for takeoff. In the cockpit, the pilot pushed the thrust levers forward. Headlights cut through the mist. The aircraft was now past the speed of no return. And just then, a dark silhouette began to form through the fog. Another aircraft. Another Boeing 747, heading straight toward it, from the opposite direction, only meters away. What followed is nearly impossible to imagine. But how did it come to this? Where was air traffic control? And what single misstep led to the deadliest disaster in aviation history? This heartbreaking incident took place in the Canary Islands, Spain. A tragedy the world now knows as the Tenerife Airport disaster. Welcome to my channel. Our story begins on March 26, 1977, the day before the crash. Pan Am Flight 1736, a Boeing 747 jumbo jet, took off from Los Angeles International Airport. Its next stop was New York, to pick up more passengers, before heading across the Atlantic to its final destination, Las Palmas, in the Canary Islands. It was a charter flight, completely booked. Most passengers were older tourists, planning to enjoy a luxury cruise in Las Palmas. Located around 100 kilometers off the coast of Morocco, Las Palmas is the capital of the Canary Islands. Famous for its tropical beauty and mild climate, but in 1977, beneath that beauty lay unrest. A separatist group called MPAC was demanding independence from Spain and often turned to violence to make their message heard. It was one such violent act that triggered the events leading to this catastrophe. After a brief stop in New York, Pan Am Flight 1736 resumed its journey. The crew included Captain Victor Grubbs, 56, First Officer Robert Bragg, 39, Flight Engineer George Warnes, 46, 13 flight attendants, and 380 passengers. Meanwhile, in Amsterdam, KLM Flight 4805, another Boeing 747, was preparing to depart for the same destination, Las Palmas. In the cockpit were Captain Jacob van Zanten, 50, First Officer Klaas Moes Moortitu, and Flight Engineer Willem Schroeder, 48, with 11 attendants and 235 passengers. As both aircraft approached Las Palmas, two men at the airport walked to a flower shop, placed a suspicious bag nearby, and disappeared. Inside the bag, a time bomb. At exactly 1:00 p.m., the airport's reception desk received a chilling phone call. The caller, claiming to represent MPAC, warned a bomb will explode in 15 minutes. The airport staff rushed into action, evacuating the entire terminal. And right on time, a powerful blast tore through the building. Part of the terminal roof collapsed. All operations were suspended. Hugh Allison was what ended. Flights were cancelled, and incoming ones were diverted. KLM 4805, now nearing Las Palmas, was diverted to the nearest alternate airport, Tenerife North Airport, about 110 kilometers away. It landed at 1:38 p.m. Moments later, Pan Am 1736 was also redirected to the same airport. But Tenerife North was not designed for this kind of traffic, especially not two massive jumbo jets at once. It had just one runway, one taxiway, and a small terminal apron. As flights kept arriving, the small airport grew dangerously congested. When both flights landed, the weather was clear. But Tenerife sits at 2,000 feet above sea level, surrounded by mountains near the Atlantic. Moist ocean air often collides with the hills, rises and cools, suddenly forming thick, low fog. Visibility on the ground began to deteriorate rapidly. While passengers waited inside the terminal, KLM crew decided to refuel fully, planning a non-stop return to Amsterdam if Las Palmas reopened, avoiding another fuel stop. But that refueling operation blocked the taxiway, meaning Pan Am's plane was stuck behind them. At 4:05 p.m., the KLM aircraft finished refueling and was cleared to taxi. But due to congestion, air traffic control instructed the crew to taxi down the runway itself, all the way to the opposite end, and then perform a 180-degree turn for takeoff. For takeoff, KLM began rolling. Pan Am was instructed to follow them on the same runway, but to exit at taxiway C3, so KLM could take off. But the fog grew thicker. Visibility dropped to just 300 meters at times. As KLM reached the far end and turned into position, Pan Am also began taxiing. But in the poor visibility, the pilots missed exit C3. It was angled backward and poorly marked, almost impossible to spot in the conditions. They passed it unknowingly and remained on the runway. Farooq radioed for takeoff clearance. The controller began reading departure instructions, but never explicitly cleared them for takeoff. KLM captain responded, "We are at takeoff." Or possibly, "You were taking off." The phrase remains unclear to this day. The tower replied, "Okay," but moments later added, "A standby for takeoff. I will call you." But that second message was never heard in KLM cockpit. At the same time, Pan Am's crew, realizing they were still on the runway, also radioed, "We are still on the runway," as the two messages overlapped. In the KLM cockpit, all they heard was radio static. As Pan Am slowly passed the missed exit, the tower radioed them again. "Advise when you clear the runway." Pan Am replied, "Okay." But by then KLM captain had already opened the throttles and begun the takeoff roll. KLM flight engineer, having overheard Pan Am's last transmission, warned the captain. "Is he not clear then?" The captain replied, perhaps distracted, "Oh yes," and continued accelerating down the foggy runway. They could see only 300 meters ahead. Suddenly, through the mist, Pan Am's pilots spotted bright headlights coming straight at them. At first, they assumed KLM was stationary. Then they realized the awful truth. It was moving, fast, toward them. They tried to swerve off the runway, but it was too late. KLM right engine struck Pan Am's upper fuselage, slicing through the first-class cabin. The KLM aircraft briefly became airborne, then crashed down the runway in flames, its full fuel tanks igniting a massive fireball. All 248 people aboard KLM died instantly. On Pan Am's aircraft, the first-class section was destroyed, but some passengers in economy survived, escaping through holes in the fuselage, jumping 20 feet to safety. Of the 396 people on board Pan Am 1736, only 61 survived. More lives might have been saved, but in the fog the control tower had no idea a crash had even occurred. They were informed only when another crew on the ground saw flames on the runway. Emergency crews struggled to reach the site quickly in the thick fog. In total, 583 lives were lost. The worst aviation disaster in history, not caused by terrorism or sabotage. The investigation pointed to a chain reaction of failures. The bomb threat in Las Palmas, the diversion to an overcrowded airport, KLM full refuel, blocking the taxiway deteriorating, weather missed runway exits, and above all, KLM premature takeoff without clear ATC permission. The final verdict held KLM captain and crew responsible for taking off without proper clearance. Despite a last-minute warning from their own flight engineer, the Tenerife airport disaster became a turning point for global aviation. It led to sweeping changes. Standardized radio communication, clearer phraseology, like a cleared for takeoff, and hold position mandatory ground radar at airports, improved runway signage and lighting, and a renewed emphasis on cockpit crew coordination. Today, Tenerife has 2 airports. The northern one, where the disaster occurred, still operates, but a newer, better-equipped southern airport was built to avoid weather-related issues. We hope you found this video gripping and insightful. Don't forget to like, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments.